quote. I didn't watch it back in the day, so I can't speak on it. They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then.
Come again?
I don't think anybody had skill back then.
Which is 2 of 11. Robinson with the steal. He's got Anderson all the way.
He's liable to score 40 points, or he's liable to score nothing. He's very erratic, but he can do it when he's hot.
Oh, check that shot out, will you?
Didn't touch anything but molecules.
The ultimate finger roll. Oh, no. You got the glass.
It comes off. Jones wanted it, but Magic wants it more. Dribble behind.
Neek drives right, spins. Oh, what a move by Dominique.
I want to apologize to all of you for what I did. It was very wrong, and I am very sorry. I just would like to move on and lead a normal life. You know, get a job and a wife, and change my ways.
When it comes to current day players in the NBA, it's a very trendy thing to downplay past eras and really act like basketball started in 2016. Now, the latest player to make a fool of himself is Anthony Edwards, as of course Edwards downplayed the 80s and 90s, saying Jordan was the only skilled player from that decade. And the sad thing about Edwards, a lot of 80s, 90s fans, they kind of embraced him as the guy who had that old school mentality, play all the games, play hard, and play defense. But of course, comments like these just show pure ignorance and lack of knowledge about past eras. And when speaking about the 1980s, the biggest superstar from that era, the most accomplished star from that era, is of course Magic Johnson. And Magic most times doesn't really speak out, criticize players, at least not publicly. But Magic in this instance absolutely eviscerated one Anthony Edwards.
I don't never respond to a guy that's never won a championship. There's not nothing to really say. He didn't win a college championship. I don't know if he even won a high school championship.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
It's pretty crazy to think Magic Johnson nowadays is regarded as an unskilled player who played in an unskilled era. And this right here, I'd say, is specific to NBA fans as well as NBA players. As looking at baseball, football, you don't see people saying Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, they were trash, Joe Montana was garbage, or someone like Reggie Jackson, Barry Bonds, they couldn't last in today's MLB. You don't really see that. And you gotta ask the question, why is it specific to basketball fans? I think the answer is actually quite simple. Social media is the culprit for all this nonsense. And looking at NBA fans, they skew very, very young, especially on social media. As looking at Instagram, for example, this platform is exclusively people under 35, and their largest demo is 18 to 24. And looking at Instagram, the NBA, 88.8 million followers, an absurd amount. Now the NFL, only 30.3. If you went off social media purely, you'd think basketball was much more popular, just a better overall sport. But looking at the ratings, the interest, NFL every single year destroys the NBA. And once again, social media, it skews very, very young. NFL fans, I'd say the majority of them much older, see numerous decades, going back to the 80s, even 1970s. NBA fans, mostly 18 to 24, especially online. And looking back at Magic in his era, this guy's peak, his apex, was in the late 80s, specifically 1987. And if you look at the NBA at that point, the talent, the skill, it was higher than almost every year since or before. And using the top 75 list as a gauge for how great this era was, at this point in 87, there were 17 players on that list playing in the current NBA. That's roughly 24% of the greatest players of all time. Kareem, Barkley, Bird, Julius Erving, Magic, Jordan, Moses, McHale, Hakeem, the list goes on and on and on. And looking at those 17 players right there, only 5 of them weren't all-stars. And even then, those guys were all-star caliber and honestly snubbed of that all-star game, as Karl Malone was a walking 22-10, 50% shooting, all-star caliber. Patrick Ewing, 22-9 with 2 blocks, only missed the game due to injuries. Clyde Drexler, 22-7-6 with 2 steals, somehow missed the all-star game. The only guy who wasn't in their prime and all-star yet was John Stockton. But even then, Stockton the next year in 88 will lead the NBA in assists as a first-time full starter. Long story short, the mid-80s, they were absolutely loaded. And looking at the 87 All-Star game, it is the Eastern Conference. They had 9 players on the top 75 all-time list, and their 5 starters, all of them made the list.
Impressive. Very nice.
Now, when talking about the MVP, one of the best years of all time for that award was 1988. Not just because the winner of the award, but the depth of the candidates. And looking at this list, I mean, star-studded top to bottom. Of course, first place you have Jordan, 35 points per game, the MVP, and the DPOY. He could jump out of the gym, he was lightning quick. I mean, the best version of Jordan to a lot of people. Beneath him, Larry Joe Bird, 29.9 points per game on 53-41 and 92 splits. In all league history, only Steph Curry had a higher scoring average than the 54-90 season, that of course being in 2016. And I'd say Steph was a pretty skilled player. Now beneath Bird, you had Magic. Magic at this point, the best passer of all time, bar none. And of course in the midst of winning back-to-back championships. 4th place Charles Barkley, what we thought Zion could be, Barkley actually was. Beneath Barkley at 5th place, you have Clyde Drexler, who if it wasn't for Jordan would get much more shine. Beneath Drexler, Dominique, overshadowed by Bird, 30 points per game this year. 7th place came Olajuwon, the most skilled big man of all time, at his apex at 25 years old. Beneath Hakeem, Karl Malone, 24 years old. 10th place, John Stockton, the NBA's assist leader. 11th place, Alex English, the guy who showed most points in the 80s. And 12th place, Isaiah Thomas, a 2-time champion. When looking at the 88 MVP race, 11 of the 12 finishers were first ballot Hall of Famers. The only guy who wasn't was Fat Lever. I mean, it once again proved this league was absolutely stacked and loaded. Now, once again, looking back at Ant Edwards, he already is a very good player with potential to be a great player. And of course, these comments kind of sour a lot of fans on him as a player and his ceiling. As in talking about NBA legends, the cream of the crop, the top 1%, what do all those guys have in common? They respect the game, know the history, and go to former legends for advice on their game and how to improve it. Case in point, with someone like Kobe.
At the time, I deal with what I've referred to as Goat Mountain. I went to Goat Mountain, and I talked to Magic, Michael, Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Jerry West, Oscar Robinson, Bill Russell. You know, so I would talk to them. What did you do? What were your experiences?
What you saw right there from Kobe is the definition of being a student of the game and learning the game. And for someone like Bill Russell back in the day, he was the godfather of the NBA. He'd seen the 60s, the 70s, all the way up to the 2020s. He'd basically seen everything and everyone. And when Kobe went to Russell, one of the past legends, he learned a thing or two about how to win a championship in his post-Shaq career.
He said, when I played, I could score the ball. I could handle the ball, and I could pass the ball. But it was really important, in order for us to win, I had to look at my teammates and say, okay, there's other players here that do that better. Therefore, I must allow them to do that. And I thought that was a very, very insightful thing that I used in how I was able to go on and win those 2 championships post-Shaq.
So, stopping right there, Kobe, again, a student of the game, and sought out advice from the elders. And here's the funny thing, Bill Russell, he was drafted in the 1950s. Kobe, the late 90s. That's roughly a 40-year gap between age and playing days. And despite that, Kobe went to Russell for advice and knowledge, and it paid off with 2 more championships. My point being, if Anthony Edwards wants to be a truly great NBA player, you gotta go back to the legends, take bits and pieces of their game, and apply it to your own. So that right there is the end of the video. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.